Okay, this is the last chapter of the Thief Knot. It's chapter 30, called Verses. Emmett and his cop friend marched Moth and Kit Fletchwood back up to the surface, leaving Marzana and her parents, Brandon, Meddy, Amelia, and JJ, alone by the lockers. Will this cause you problems? Meddy asked Brandon. With the below ground, keeping it secret? Brandon shook his head, unconcerned. I'm sure Emmett can handle his friend. We did him a huge favor. He'll pay it back. Same with the Hydes. It's happened before. This is how the old hole-and-corner railways stayed that way. I can't wrap my head around it, Mrs. Hecklebairn said. Those boys really thought old Tumbler left them some kind of inheritance? Jewels or money or something? Tumbler? It seems like maybe he did plant something here when he came back through Nagspeak, Marzana said. He described it as a treasure hunt he hadn't been able to bring them on, so they went a little nuts, or Moth did anyway, when there was nothing to find. It couldn't have been valuable in the money sense. Amelia said the lock was about as easy to pick as they make them, but whatever was there must have been discovered by somebody long ago. Maybe, but it would also have been right in character for Tumbler to have set up some kind of elaborate wild goose chase ending in a box full of nothing. Mrs. Hecklebairn said with a short, sad laugh. He was a goofball. He was such a sweet goofball. The last word caught in her throat as she said it. Marzana took her mother's hand. I guess if somebody had found something there years ago, they probably wouldn't have gone to the trouble of locking it up again. The bear trap Amelia had picked was lying on the ground. Marzana walked over and retrieved it. The logo engraved on the front was a growling bear. One of the locks in the old iron fence at Merrymead had this same logo, only that one also had 2 lines of writing scratched onto it, one above and one below the bear. Bobby and Lila, February 14th, forever. Huh, Marzana said thoughtfully. She turned the lock over, dimly aware that everyone was watching her. Ignoring the embarrassed prickles of heat this brought to her face was easier than usual. An idea was forming. What else could I tell those kids? Mrs. Hecklebairn had asked after Moth and Kit's visit to Hedgelock Court. Tumbler was a sweet guy. He loved poetry. He loved a good brain teaser. He was a whiz with locks. Taught me everything I know. The back of this bear trap lock had been engraved too. It was much neater than the scratchy scrawls on the locks on the Merrymead fence, but it too had clearly been done by hand in one of those fancy old-fashioned scripts. The letters were right side up when the shackle was pointed down. I'll tell you a story of wind and water. 208. Marzana covered her mouth. She glanced around at all those other locks. Maybe they hadn't been intended as camouflage after all. Oh, Nye, I really, really wish you were here. Mom, she said, I think Tumbler did leave them something, and it's still here. The other members of the knot pushed past the adults as Marzana held up the lock. 208, JJ read. Another lock number? I think so. Amelia peered at the numbers surrounding them. Must be in the next aisle. Marzana reached into her little kit bag and pulled out the notepad and pen. JJ, would you take this down? They rushed around the corner, following the number until they came to 208, which sported a green enameled padlock with a fir tree logo. Marzana flipped it upside down. 2 more lines of text had been scratched through the green and into the brass below. Of deeds great and small, and a grand smuggler queen. 120. JJ squatted beside the lock to take the line down. Then Amelia picked the lock with her usual ease, and they all stared in. The locker was empty. On to 120, I guess, Amelia said. With Marzana's parents and Brandon watching, bemused, the 4 of them followed Tumbler Fletchwood's path from lock to lock. Each held a line of the larger message, along with a number that pointed them to the next one. Each was engraved with the lettering upside down, just like the first, and each, when Amelia got it open, was revealed to be empty. Still nothing, she observed. They were up to the 5th lock. Marzana flipped it up so that the back faced out with the letters right side up. I bet that's why they're all inscribed like this. The first lock had to be easily pickable because if you didn't take it off, you'd probably never look closely enough at it to find the words. But the lines are all written upside down, so once you know they're there, you don't have to take the locks off to read them. I'll tell you a tale of a place like a dream, this one said. Maybe the locks and what they say are all there is, Meddy suggested. There were 16 locks total. After the line of verses on the last one, a combination lock. The word fiend had been engraved in place of a number. Guess that's it, Marzana said, holding the lock up so JJ could finish writing it down. What have we got? JJ passed her the notebook. You do the honors. With her friends on her heels, Marzana carried it out into the slightly better light of the main room where the grown-ups were waiting. Okay, here we go. I'll tell you a story of wind and of water, of deeds great and small and a grand smuggler queen, of days we were heroes, of villains and hazards, the rivers and ocean we sailed in between. I'll tell you a tale of a place like a dream, where strange things await round each corner and bend, where streets with no names lead to journeys and perils, and miraculous sights down each shadowed dead end. We voyaged here many a magical year, a ship full of heroes, and our smuggler queen. Now here we are, you and I, back all together, so I can share with you these places I've been. But the best place to be, and the tales I most treasure, in all my home seas, from one peak to the other, after years of adventures and exploits and wonders, the greatest of all have been you and your brother. She looked up. That's it. Her mother smiled. Now that sounds like Tumbler Fletchwood. She shook her head sadly, and those boys never knew he left this for them. Marzana lowered the notebook. The worst part is, I think they already had it. Moth said that along with the letter saying he was sorry he'd never got to take them on the treasure hunt he'd set, Tumbler left them a poem. She took the first lock from her pocket and looked at the engraved line. They had it the whole time. She returned the lock to its latch and clicked it shut. Amelia, who had been strolling among the lockers as she'd listened to the poem, called out from somewhere down one of the aisles, Hey Marzana, you won't believe this, but there's something in this one after all. Marzana, JJ, and Meddy followed her voice back to locker 201, where the final lock had been. Well, what? Marzana asked curiously. I'm not actually sure. Amelia stood in front of the open locker, swinging the lock thoughtfully around her thumb. See for yourself. Inside were two tall, narrow packages. The paper wrappings were faded and yellowed, but the pattern on each was still clearly visible and unmistakably cartographic. Wow, Marzana breathed, reaching in to bring the parcels out into the dim light. Mom, Dad, come look at this. Mr. and Mrs. Hacklebarand hurried down the aisle and peered over the heads of the kids. Her father whistled. I don't believe it, Mrs. Hacklebarand said. I haven't seen one of these in ages. Meddy watched fascinated. Are those what I think they are? Marzana's mother nodded. Looks like it. Well, what are they? JJ asked impatiently. The windrose and the portolan, Marzana replied. Kites. Very special kites. Her voice caught in her throat. Kites with a story. The tale of the kites, which had been printed with maps and distributed by Violet Cross and her crew long ago, in the days when any cartography not made by Deacon and Morvengard had been contraband in Nagspeak, was one of the few stories her mother had told Marzana herself. And they flew like anything, Mr. Hacklebarand said, kissing Marzana's head. Unbelievably good flyers, those kites. Her mother grinned. It would have been pointless if they hadn't. Marzana clutched the parcels to her chest. Then she hesitated. Can we take them with us? Moth and Kit might never have them, but they were part of Tumbler's gift, and somehow she felt uncertain about taking any part of that gift away. You absolutely should take them, Mrs. Hacklebarand said. I guarantee you, Tumbler didn't put a pair of kites here 15 years ago for his two young sons because he'd figured they'd be a museum piece. You read that poem. Why do you think he did it? So they could all fly them together after they solved the treasure hunt, Marzana guessed, blinking away the wavering in her eyes. Tumbler Fletchwood had planned a true Nagspeak adventure for his Chesapeake-born sons, who, much like Marzana and Nyala, had probably grown up thinking nothing exciting ever happened to them. Kites should be flown, Mrs. Hacklebarand said. These especially. She laughed. Emmett's going to go nuts when he sees them. Nyala and Ciro, too, Marzana said. Can I tell him the story? Nyala, with her obsession with manipulating paper to reveal hidden meanings, and Ciro the camoufleur, the tale behind the map kites would blow their minds. Mrs. Hacklebarand considered. Then she smiled. I think so. Marzana felt herself glow. Thank you. Welcome. All right, crew. Marzana's father said at last. What do you think? Can we get out of here now? Marzana nodded. I think we're done. Brandon jogged away for a quick trip to the surface to have a word with Emmett, who was busy with the captives and the additional arriving police. Peony's really okay? Marzana asked her mother. The other members of the knot edged closer to hear the answer. She's really okay, Mrs. Hacklebaron said, and I don't know how long it would have taken for us to find her, or for her to find her way home if you guys hadn't spotted that message she hid in the ransom note. But what about Tasha Cormorant? Amelia asked. Mrs. Hacklebaron gave Amelia a considering look. She'll surface again at some point. My dad would never have put together any job that involved taking a kid, Amelia said defensively. Marzana's mother put one arm around Amelia's shoulders, and Marzana, J.J., and Meddy stared as Amelia slumped into the embrace. There are plenty of bad apples out there in the world, Mrs. Hacklebaron said quietly. Never let that make you doubt that your dad was one of the good ones. All right, Brandon called as he returned. Let's get you all home. Train's waiting. As they walked, Marzana did something she hadn't done in a long time. She took hold of her mother's hand. Mrs. Hacklebaron looked down in some surprise, then she squeezed Marzana's palm. Walk slow, Marzana whispered. Her mother obeyed. She said nothing, waiting for Marzana to put her thoughts in order. Mom, I feel like I understand them a little, Marzana said quietly once there was a bit of distance between themselves and the others. Moth and Kit, I mean. And it makes me feel, I don't know, gross. Mrs. Hacklebaron gave her a long look. You understand why they are hurting, or you understand why they are hurting, or you understand why they took that hurt and proceeded to set this whole mess into motion. The first part, Marzana said quickly. It's just, you know how I keep asking you to tell me more about you in the old days and who you used to be and all of it. Mom, I feel like I need that. I need it. Her voice rose just a bit before she managed to stop it. I think Kit Fletchwood was feeling something like that. Maybe that's even how it started out for Moth before he convinced himself that there was something of value here. He must have spent a ton of money and time setting all of this up, and there was really no reason to think that what Tumblr had hidden was all that valuable. This all started with the Fletchwoods trying to find out where they came from. You think I should have been more forthcoming? Mrs. Hacklebaron said quietly. Well, yeah, Marzana said, with me, obviously, but I'm not saying it's your fault Moth did this. I'm saying I think I understand what they needed, or thought they needed, before this caper of theirs went from a game to a kidnapping, and it's freaking me out. I understand that, her mother nodded. Empathy is important, but making excuses, that's a whole nother ball of wax. And I don't hear you making excuses for him. Marzana shook her head emphatically. No, I'm not. But it feels icky that we both might have had the same frustrations and we both took them and... Hold up, Mrs. Hacklebaron stopped walking. You both have the same frustrations. Plenty of people do. Neither of you could control what I or Tumblr was willing to give, or could give, in his case, and I'm not going to apologize for that. I made my decisions based on the need to keep people safe, and I stand by those choices. Tumblr fell victim to a whole house being built over the only way into this place. Neither you nor Moth could control how those things made you feel, but you could both control what you did with those feelings. She pointed back in the direction they'd come, toward the stairwell to the surface. I'm not going to pretend they're not responsible for what Tasha Cormorant did to fulfill her contract with them. Moth and Kit are responsible for kidnapping a girl. And you, her mother tucked a wisp of hair behind Marzana's ear, you chose to break some rules and risk your dad's and my ire to save that girl. I might not think your methods were ideal, and I might hate that you and your friends put yourselves in danger, and I might even suspect that you're wanting an adventure partly spurred on your involvement, but still, rather than becoming a kidnapper or even smuggler or a thief, which given your genetics would have been my first two guesses for the most likely outcome if you ever decided to go rogue, you became a hero. You see the difference, right? Yeah, Marzana said gratefully. When you put it like that, I think I do. On the other hand, Mrs. Hacklebaron said grimly as they started walking again, I think this means you take a little more after your father than me. I'm not sure how I feel about that. They boarded the train, and Brandon started up the engine. Next stop, Cotgrave Wall, he announced, giving the bell pull 3 hard yanks. Hey, Meddy, JJ said, dropping into the seat next to her as the train jumped forward. That was some wicked handling you did with that balloon. Amazing. Especially since those punching balloons are kind of heavy, Amelia said. I couldn't believe the way it bobbed and floated like a regular helium balloon. Meddy glanced from JJ to Amelia, then looked back at JJ for a long minute with pursed lips. I was just going to ask how you made it deflate like that from all the way across the room. JJ stared at her. I didn't do anything. Not after we stopped the balloon and backpack dance thing. I definitely didn't make it deflate. Well, I didn't do it, Meddy retorted. I was helping you set up your message on the playing cards when I was inside that one locker waiting to start the pyrotechnics with the burning envelope. I had nothing to do with the balloon. She turned to Marzana. You have it, right? You caught it and put it in your pocket? Marzana produced the flattened green balloon. She handed it to JJ. Yeah, he said, examining it closely. But this is just an ordinary balloon. It matches my cards because I bought them at the same magic shop. But it's not gimmicked or anything. I didn't do it, Meddy insisted again. Well, neither did I, JJ retorted. The two of them looked at Marzana and Amelia. Amelia put her hands up. Not guilty. I had a knife to my throat, if you recall, Marzana said, lowering her voice so her parents, who were up at the front chatting with Brandon in the cab, wouldn't hear. Innocent. You don't think, Amelia pointed at Meddy. I said I didn't. Oh, Meddy hesitated. You don't mean me, you mean someone like me. But you'd have known, Marzana said, wouldn't you? Meddy paused again. I have absolutely no idea, actually. They all looked down at the balloon, but it was just an ordinary balloon, and it had nothing to say for itself. It felt like almost no time at all before Brandon began the process of slowing the train as it approached the station inside Marymead. And then there it was, a cave of dusty violet, lit from above by glass vines and petals that shone their light down on the floor of constellations. The doors slid open, and before Amelia, who was closest, had even stepped all the way out onto the platform, Marzana heard a cry from the balcony above. They're back! They're back! Cyril leaned over the baluster and waved wildly. Hey, Amelia shouted. Pipe down! Voices carry. Don't worry, Cyril called down. Your canary's still at it. Or was a minute ago, anyway. The secret's safe. Nyala burst into view on the balcony, looking as if she'd just run down from the library, paused for half a second, then plunged down the rest of the stairs. Mars! Guys! Marzana pushed past Amelia and caught Nyala in a hug. Wait till I tell you, she crowed. I'm going to explode, Nyala sang, hugging her tight and dancing the two of them around. We did it! She held Marzana at arm's length. We did do it, didn't we? Saved the day, caught the bad guys, found the girl? Marzana grinned. We did it. There were hugs and more hugs as Cyril trotted down the stairs, and JJ, Meddy, and Marzana's parents disembarked. Cyril walked up to Marzana's side. Good to have you back, Captain. For just a moment, his hand squeezed hers. Marzana managed what she hoped was a nonchalant smile. She returned the squeeze, then Cyril let go, and the moment was over. Good to be back. All right, Amelia barked, tucking the pair of map kites under her arm so that she could wave impatiently at them. Can I suggest we get out of here before someone finds us, please? Why don't you all come to our house, Mrs. Huckleberry suggested. She checked her watch. It's early for dinner, but I don't particularly care. I'm starving. Brandon, what about you? The conductor shrugged. Sure, if we can get out of here without having to explain ourselves to school officials for hours. We can manage that, Marzana turned to Amelia. Right? Back way? Back way. Follow me. As they climbed the stairs, Marzana found herself walking between her parents, just ahead of Brandon, who brought up the rear. This is a good crew you've got here, Mrs. Huckleberry observed. Sure is, Marzana's father said. Does it have a name? You bet, Marzana grinned. Nyala and I decided at the beginning that you need a name once you hit 5 members. And we're the Thief Knot, her parents considered. It's a good name, Mr. Huckleberry said, nodding. Marzana looked up at her friends as they crossed the balcony and continued climbing, their chatter and congratulations falling silent as they reached the top of the second staircase and listened for singing before they stepped out into the library. She smiled. I know. Marzana's mother cleared her throat. I was thinking, this reminds me of the time I had to put together a special group for a museum job. She looked down at Marzana. Did I ever tell you about that one? A museum job? She could count the stories her mother had voluntarily told her on one hand, so it didn't take long to review the catalog. Her mother's smile widened. I believe you have not, Mother. Mrs. Hacklebairn put an arm around Marzana's shoulder. Tell you on the walk home. The end. Yay! Yay! They found Puny. Everything is awesome. Thanks for listening.